Coming up on Network Africa. Nearly 40 vehicles wrecked in South Africa accident. Ceasefire starts and is broken in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. UN urges M23 rebels to respect the peace. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak holds talks with Rwanda's president on migrants' plan. Welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Anne Nwawadu. We begin now. Nearly 50 vehicles were strewn across the motorway near the South African town of Mpumalanga in KwaZulu-Natal province yesterday after a truck caused a massive pileup during morning traffic. There are no reports of deaths yet from the scene of the accident, but pictures and videos of thrashed cars make the road look like a junkyard. An eyewitness said a big truck motoring along knocked over cars stuck in traffic.
There was a lot of traffic. Cars are moving bumper to bumper each other. And then I noticed at the back when I'm driving my car, I noticed that there's a big truck is coming right far from, what do you call it, Gateway. It's already past Gateway. And then it just knocked all those cars on the traffic. It's knocking all those cars, and then there's no way to run away from that truck, and those cars that are bumping each other at my back, and then there's no way to come out. They end up bump my car, and then falling that the truck he passed away, and he bumped other in front too. Immediately when I stopped, there's a car that was damaged. All the cars are on top of that car, and was a lady crying saying need help. Doesn't manage to come out. It doesn't manage to come out. And then I just jumped to that lady to break the window, and then he managed to come out. But lucky, he didn't get injury, just a minor injury, glasses on the head, on the hands.
I was driving. I saw, I heard it from behind me. So I looked around because my car was stopped. And I see the cars coming towards me. Then when I looked front, by that time I was hit. And I saw this white van.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed a former mayor, Ngozi Ntesho Ramaphosa, to the newly created position of electricity minister in an effort to address the country's long-running power crisis. The new minister faces two vast challenges, and that's power cuts of up to 12 hours a day and allegations of high level of corruption at the state-run energy giant Eskom. Eskom is in debt to the tune of almost $24 billion. The rolling power cuts are strangling the economy, and some are saying that people's fury over the blackouts might even cost the governing party, the ANC, next year's election. In the cabinet changes announced on Monday evening, Mr. Ramaphosa appointed the deputy head of the ANC, Paul Mashatile, as the deputy president. The move was widely expected following David Mabuza's resignation just last week. He also replaced the outspoken tourism minister, Lindiwe Sisulu, who has opposed the president in recent months. Her position was handed to a leader of the small opposition party, Good Patricia de Lille. Others who were replaced were the Sports, Arts and Culture Minister, as well as the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. We're now being joined by our correspondent in South Africa. Innocent Samosa has joined us online from Johannesburg. Hello, Innocent.
Hi, Anne, and thank you so very much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, the new deputy president is no surprise, but how important is his appointment at this time?
Well, indeed, and it goes without saying that a big task lies ahead of Deputy President Paul Mashatile, or a daunting task for a want of a better term, because he would want to actually protect the African National Congress as we're moving closer to the 2024 elections, and B, he would want to be the president's keeper in a sense that you would know that the Pala saga still hovers around President Ramaphosa, that dark cloud still hovers around President Ramaphosa's head. So he would want to protect Ramaphosa since he is in the presidency. So right now we understand that the SARS, which is the South African Revenue Services, they have now came up with a new revelation that the proceeds from his farm were not declared by the South African Revenue Services. So the Pala saga, in other words, taking a different twist altogether. But also he would want to stabilize the factions in the African National Congress. You would recall the previous elections when he became Deputy President Paul Mashatile, the delegates at Nazareth, they actually were coming out to actually show us that the factions in the African National Congress are no longer a secret. In fact, they even show it on media. You'd recall when Ramaphosa came on stage to actually address the delegates, they were singing Wenzeni uZuma, which means what did Zuma do? And of course, former President Jacob Zuma, in many ways, he came out to speak about the pusillanimity and the vindictiveness of other cadres. He says that they know no limit. So the work of Paul Mashatile is significant in terms of balancing the structures in the African National Congress. So I must say a heavy task lies ahead of him.
So, Steve, electricity is getting a lot of attention, but will the increasing number of personnel responsible for electricity translate to improved power supply? And if so, what is the timeline looking like?
Indeed, there's a lot of expectations from the new Minister of Electricity, Dr. Gwen, or should I say Dr. Ramaphosa. So a lot is expected on him because you would know now that South Africa's capacity standing at around 58 billion, or should I say 58,000 megawatts. This is the capacity of the country at the moment. But they're aiming to get 77,000 megawatts in 2030. This, of course, more of this capacity will be coming from renewable energy, which many commentators have been saying that it's not sustainable, it's not going to work in South Africa. So it really remains to be seen. But the energy deficit in South Africa, it's between 6,000 megawatts and 10,000 megawatts. So Dr. Ramaphosa, speaking to local media today, he actually mentioned that he will be working around the clock to essentially, fix the issues in Eskom. And he said that is not naive, that the Eskom is facing a lot of challenges, but he said that there is 10,000 megawatts that is needed to actually solve and reduce the burden on load shedding. He says that they're going to go to plant level, where that's where the root of the challenge is at, because you would know that part of the problem is that there is no money. Eskom does not have money in this financial year to actually purchase diesel. So this could very well be that the country would have to give more money to Eskom to buy more diesel, and the economy has not been doing well. So where is the money going to come from? So those are some of the questions that we're asking ourselves. But of course, going back to your question, you spoke about the timelines. He said that in 21 days, he will be coming back to give us what he called an implementation plan as to how he's going to deal with the issues of Eskom in as a whole. He said that he's still consulting with private sector to make sure that they get that 10,000 megawatts shortfall in.
All right. So with all of these appointments here and there, are there any other surprises on the list, do you think, especially with the new entrants?
Well, 100%, 100%. In fact, it didn't come as a shock, I must say, but one that really stood out for me was the ministry in the presidency responsible for the planning, monitoring, and evaluation. This ministry, I guess, is very important, and in the sense that because we've got a lot of ministries, we've got a lot of deputy ministers and ministers. So this could very well be that there will be more accountability from these different ministries. There's been a lot of complaints and previously that Ramaphosa's cabinet is bloated, it's costing the country a lot of money in terms of paying deputy ministers, these DGs, and all of these people. So I guess this comes at the right time when we can be able to. So this ministry is the Minister of Kokta. She was a deputy minister. Her name is Tembi. She was a deputy minister during Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's tenure. I guess she's done well during a term under Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, because Dlamini Zuma did not really show interest in serving in Ramaphosa's cabinet. So in a way, she stepped in many respects to deal with some of the challenges that had to do with her department.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and all the analysis on Network Africa. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Semosa, thanks a lot. So other stories now. A ceasefire which took effect in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been broken. Aid workers in eastern DRC say that clashes are continuing between the army and the M23 rebels despite the ceasefire agreement. They say there was fighting on at least two fronts. The M23 said it was committed to a peaceful resolution, but it will continue to defend itself if attacked by the Congolese military or its allies. The M23 and the army have accused each other of launching attacks on Monday, which led to significant civilian displacement. Rwanda denies backing the M23, which has captured large swaths of territories over the past year, and it is threatening the regional capital, Goma. The Secretary General welcomed recent engagement by the President of Angola and African Union champion for peace and reconciliation, João Lourenço, with the M23, which resulted in the announcement of a ceasefire beginning on March the 7th, and that's today, in compliance with the decisions of the African Union Peace and Security Council on February the 17th in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The UN Secretary General has asked the M23 rebel group to stop fighting and withdraw from captured territories. It seems the appeal has fallen on deaf ears as the rebels have now launched fresh attacks on Congolese army positions on Monday, seizing a town and several villages.
Welcomes recent engagements by the President of Angola and the African Union champion for peace and reconciliation, João Lourenço, with the M23 rebel group, which resulted in the announcement of a ceasefire beginning tomorrow, March 7th, in compliance with the decisions of the African Union Peace and Security Council that were taken on 17th February in Addis Ababa. The Secretary General urges the M23 to respect the ceasefire in order to create conditions for its full and effective withdrawal from all occupied areas in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, in line with the decisions of the Luanda mini-summit held on the 23rd of November of last year. The Secretary General condemns all violence against civilians and renews his call on all Congolese and foreign armed groups to lay down their weapons and disarm unconditionally. He urges all parties to the conflict to ensure immediate and unfettered humanitarian access to the affected population and to ensure protection of civilians and respect for international humanitarian law. He calls on all actors to refrain from hate speech and incitement to violence. The Secretary General reaffirms the continued support of the United Nations to the Luanda and Nairobi processes.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has held a phone conversation with President Paul Kagame of Rwanda about the controversial scheme to deport migrants to Rwanda. A statement from Downing Street said the leaders committed to continue to work together to ensure this important partnership is delivered successfully. The UK government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda has been met by opposition, although a British High Court ruled in December 2022 that it was lawful. Opponents had argued that Rwanda is not a safe destination for asylum seekers and that the scheme breaks human rights laws. The United States is deeply concerned by remarks from Tunisia's president on migration and reports of arbitrary arrests. State Department spokesperson Ned Price, who made this statement, is now asking Tunisian authorities to meet obligations to protect the rights of refugees, asylum seekers and migrants. Tunisian President Kais Saied on Sunday denounced racism and pointed to possible legal consequences for those attacking migrants 10 days after announcing a crackdown on illegal migration using language the African Union condemned as racialized hate speech.
As you heard from the World Bank, we too are deeply concerned by President Said's remarks regarding migration from sub-Saharan Africa to Tunisia and reports of arbitrary arrests of migrants in recent weeks. These remarks are not in keeping with Tunisia's long history of generosity in hosting and protecting refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, and we're disturbed by reports of violence against these very migrants. We urge Tunisian authorities to meet their obligations under international law to protect the rights of refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, and we encourage Tunisian authorities to coordinate with international humanitarian organizations to facilitate the safe, dignified, and voluntary return of migrants who wish to return to their countries of origin.
Meanwhile, the World Bank has suspended talks over its future engagement with Tunisia following President Kais Saied's recent criticism of sub-Saharan migrants. The outgoing head of the bank, David Malpass, said that Mr. Saied's remarks had triggered racially motivated harassment and even violence in Tunisia. He describes the situation as deeply concerning, but also adds that recent steps by the Tunisian government to support migrants were already positive. But over the weekend, President Said denounced racism despite making comments last month that African immigrants were part of a plot to change Tunisia's demographic profile. The Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS ambassador to Liberia, Josephine Nkrumah, has reported to the authorities about threats to her life by a Facebook user. In a letter to the Liberian Justice Ministry, Ms. Nkrumah said the user, identified as Carson, posted on Facebook urging the Monrovia mayor to send her down 6 feet. The user claimed the move will draw the international community's attention to the insecurity in Liberia. Ms. Nkrumah told the Liberian authorities that the comment was considered a grave threat to her life and the staff of the ECOWAS mission in the country. Monrovia City Mayor Jefferson Koigi has blamed his political opponents for spreading misinformation ahead of October elections. The UN mission in South Sudan says that it is following the recent sacking of the defense minister, asking parties to exercise restraint and even engage in a collegial spirit in order to resolve such sensitive national issue. President Salva Kiir sacked the country's first female defense minister, Angelina Teny, who was the main opposition party, who was from there. The party is now calling for her reinstatement, but just yesterday, the UN envoy to the country, Nicholas Haysom, told the UN Security Council that 2023 will be a make-or-break year, noting that parties had agreed there will be no extensions on the timelines of the peace deal. He noted that key hurdles that the country must address to complete the transitional phase next year, including the drafting of a new constitution. And following the sack of the first female defense minister, Angelina Teny, the special representative of the Secretary General for South Sudan and the head of the UN mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, Nicholas Haysom, has called for the transitional government in South Sudan to implement a peace agreement to hold credible elections next year, saying, quote, "We see 2023 as a make-or-break year and as a test for all parties to the peace agreement." Mr. Haysom confirmed the United Nations has received a government request to assist the South Sudanese owned and administered elections. He also says the 3-year strategic vision has given a solid foundation to move ahead. Eswatini Prime Minister Cleopas Dlamini pledged his country's commitment to diplomatic relations with Taiwan, and it is now opposed to any sort of bullying or aggression against Taiwan. He was speaking in Taipei during a meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen when he stated, quote, The people of Taiwan should be governed within Taiwan by a government they elect themselves in fair and free elections with no external pressure. He also thanked the Taiwan government for its decade-long support of Eswatini. Eswatini is the only African state and one of the 14 countries worldwide that maintains diplomatic relations with Taiwan, which China regards as a breakaway province. Taiwan and Eswatini are set to celebrate 55 years of diplomatic ties this September. And finally on the program, Ghana is the world's second largest cocoa producer behind neighbor Ivory Coast, but is one of Africa's smallest in terms of coffee output due to lack of resources to market their own beans. One woman is contributing her own quota to growing Ghana's taste for coffee by sourcing the best coffee beans in the market.
Near the top of a forested mountain on Ghana's eastern border with Togo, a small group of women pluck bright red coffee fruits from branches in the morning. Benedicta Tamakloe, founder of the Accra-based Roaster Bean Masters, walks among them with a device to test the coffee's moisture content, while farm owner Isha Pagnu stands beside a wicker table on which thousands of sun-dried beans are spread.
When the coffee is ripe, we help everyone harvest together. When you assist one person today, they will assist another tomorrow. We time the process, indicate our starting and closing times, and we do so in all our members' farms until every coffee bean is harvested.
Tamakloe's Bean Master, one of the few women-owned coffee companies in Ghana, sources beans exclusively from women-owned farms like Pagnu's. Together, they form a collective of around 200 female coffee farmers, the country's largest of its kind.
My total aim was, how do I link buyers and the farmers? And then let's go and do my regular life activities. But I realized that it's very challenging to get information within the country, and there's also limited resources in terms of coffee as a country to play around with or to get more information. So I was advised by one, Mr. Osumenu of Cocoa Board, that sometimes you need to be in the game to understand the game properly.
The collective produced approximately 10 tons of coffee last year, much of which Tamakloe roasts herself at a chocolate factory in Accra. A portion of the proceeds funds development projects in the villages where the women farm.
It was demanding, and it's allowed me to use my skills that I learned in school to be able to help and come out with something very beautiful. And it gave me a mission beyond myself. So I saw that it gave me fulfillment.
Today, Bean Masters coffee is mostly sold in bulk to high-end restaurants and hotels. But Tamakloe aims to expand her production of retail-sized bags this year to make Bean Master available to all kinds of consumers. At Kozo, an upscale Afro-Asian fusion restaurant in Accra, staff serve customers espressos, iced coffees, and even espressos martinis using Bean Master's coffee.
I think that is a great vision and a great goal already that needs to be supported. It is only ideal for blacks to support black rather than all of the time having to import stuff here and there. So once it's grown here and its quality is just as or maybe better than what is imported, then why not?
Ivy had visited the bean farm with Tamakloe in 2021 and, impressed with the quality, has stocked Bean Masters exclusively ever since.
And that we draw the cuttings on Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Wilder.